Well, we better get going because today we're going to cover the world. It's got a lot to cover, and I'm already 5 minutes behind. So let's go ahead and open in prayer. Lord, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for the opportunity, the freedom, the privilege we have to study your word. We ask, Lord, that as we study, that you would be our teacher through your Spirit. First, in Christ's name we pray. Amen. So last week we ended kind of on a rush, kind of hurry. The Joshua had just the book of Joshua begun. We got into the Joshua assuming command. We had the story in chapter 2 of Joshua of the spies with Jericho and Rahab. And remember, we made the point Rahab was an important character because Rahab was the mother of Boaz. Boaz was the father of Obed, and Obed was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David. I mean, that's like boom, 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 boom. That's pretty important, okay? Chapters 3 and 4 was the crossing of the Jordan, much like the Red Sea. We had chapter 5, we had the conquest begins. We have the recommitment of the nation coming out of the wilderness. For 40 years, they had wandered, and they were under God's judgment because they hadn't obeyed. But now, as they come into the land, they chapter 5, they had the men circumcised. They hadn't been circumcised for 40 years. That was the commitment. That was the recommitment. And so God says, okay, now we go forward. And then they celebrate the Passover. Now we get ready to begin the conquest. Now, the end of chapter 5, we kind of mentioned in passing, Joshua sees this man standing down the road with a sword drawn, and he went to confront him, and he wanted to know, who are you? And that part of chapter 5 really belongs to chapter 6, because who is this one with a sword? Well, it's the angel of the Lord, or the captain of the Lord's hosts. It's a pre-incarnate of Christ, appearance of Christ, an actual appearance. It wasn't a theophany like a vision. It was Christ in human form before his birth. Now, we see this throughout the Bible. Abraham, God appeared to Abraham. Go read the account of Abraham. God physically comes and talks to Abraham. Okay? He wrestled with Jacob, right? It's not uncommon. It happened. And interestingly, that when God appears, he appears in the form that's needed at the time. You know, when he came to Abraham, he came as I put it as a counselor. Abraham's promised a son. He hasn't got a son, and he comes and he says, you need to trust me. You need to trust me. This time in next year, you're going to have the baby. Okay? He came down before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Not for that God needs counsel, but God was going to do a major thing. And Abraham has a profound question for God is, will not the God of all the earth do right? That's rhetorical. The answer is yes. But see, God went to Abraham and said, hey, here's what I'm doing. So there'd be no question. Why? Because God is in a covenant with Abraham. So he appears as need to. Why do you have to appear? He appeared to Jacob as a wrestler. He wrestled him. Why? He had to get Jacob to bow his knee. And he wouldn't. He resisted God, and then God touched his hip and crippled him. Said, I got your attention now, don't I? And Jacob became his servant. Okay? I gave you some references to that. So this is a preparing for Jericho. And he says, I'm the captain of the host of the army. The picture is he's got his sword drawn. The battle's going to ensue. God's going to war. Okay? And Joshua, the battle is not yours. It's mine. But you're my instrument I'm going to use. I want to turn your phones off. You know? And that's his picture. And he's going to lead the army. Because he comes out and he says, well, who are you? And he says, just take your shoes off. It's holy ground. You're standing. And then he gives him instruction. He gave Joshua the plan of attack for Jericho. 6 days. First off, the Ark of the Covenant, which symbolized God going into battle, is going to lead the fight. God splits the army, a rear guard and a forward guard. But the real key is the ark is in the middle with 7 priests with 7 ram's horns, and they march around the city one time for 6 days. You know the story. Blowing the horns. That's all. Nobody's talking. On the seventh day, they march around 7 times, and then blowing the horns, and then there's a final blast, and then everybody yells. Now, what's interesting is I thought about this, said imagine if you're on the walls of Jericho. Remember what Rahab said, they're all like, their knees are knocking, they're frightened by this whole deal. And they see the army coming, and they get ready for battle. And they're like, okay, what are they doing? They're just walking, where are they going? And off they go back to camp. They do that for 6 days. By the seventh day, they're going, like, what are they going to do? And all of a sudden, they didn't do it once. They didn't do it twice. And I could see the anxiety building in like, what's going to happen? And then the walls come down. Now, interestingly, I don't know if you know about this, in the 1930s, they did the first excavation of Jericho. And the guy who did it said, yep, the Bible's right, the walls fell out. In the 1950s, a lady from England decided to do her own excavation. And from her research, it's kind of like, these are the conclusions and recommendations upon which my research is based. In other words, if you catch that, I don't believe the Bible. So I'm going to go find that the Bible's wrong. No matter what I see, you know how I'm going to interpret it? The Bible's inaccurate. So in 1950, she published this paper and she got all these accolades saying, oh, see, the account of Jericho, there's no evidence. It's all fictitious. It didn't happen this time. It happened way back here, and it's not true. Well, along comes other people in the later times, and they start doing it. Go, no. First off, she misdated the pottery. She misdated the materials. She misdated the aging of everything. And they say, you know what? It really did happen around 1500 BC, just like the Bible says. And guess what happened? At the end of the day, the walls fell out. We have the slides? We're going to show you something here. This is kind of your first picture. That's kind of what Jericho was. It was a two tiers, okay? And then, they'll get it there. The next slide. It kind of gives you a picture. What's really important is, this was Jericho. You can kind of see the relative size of the people. They had a retaining wall, then they had a city wall and an upper wall. This is what they've all unearthed. And, for anybody to say that the walls didn't fall out, I mean, look, gravity, look at the physics. If they're going to fall, which way are they going to fall? Out, downhill. Which allowed for the Israelis to climb up and in. Okay? But just the point. We'll come back to the other slides in a little bit. But that was just kind of a picture for you of what the research says. And why it's important, because there's a lot of people who hold on to the 1950-52 research because that's what they want it to be. And they discount subsequent stuff that pretty much just debunks their assessment. Okay? It's kind of like the crossing of the Red Sea. They tried to explain, they went through a marshland. Yeah, it's really hard to drown in a marsh. But, they don't want to believe it. Okay, so they went up and they destroyed the city. And they killed all the women, all the children, all the adults, everybody except for Rahab and her family. And again, I just like to catch these little slight things in the Bible. Like, remember when the angels went to Sodom and Gomorrah, they told Lot, get out of the town, and he went out to get his family and they wouldn't come in. Remember, it was just his wife who didn't make it out all the way, and his 2 daughters and him. Well, Rahab, it seems like she got the whole family in there, which is pretty cool to me, because as they made conquest, they destroyed it and they got her out. Now, with that, God had said, here's the thing. They destroyed the livestock too. He said, but anything of value, gold, silver, iron, bronze, all that stuff went into the treasury of the Lord. Why?
It's got designed on it.
It's God's. First things, God is always to be first. They're doing in the conquest, there's a plunder, there's a booty. That is God's. It goes into the temple of the Lord. It's a picture, it's a type. Always put God first. And that was his command. At the end, he's God. He makes the rules, right? And you probably know the story. They were all happy. They had victory. They went forward, they conquered it, they destroyed it. Well, the next story in chapter 7 is the defeat at Ai. And it plays into what happened at Jericho. God has commanded, all this stuff belongs to me. So they said, they went to Ai. How did they go to Ai? Well, they followed the same route. Joshua sent up a couple spies, said, come back and tell us what you think. They came back and said, these guys, we're going to sweep them with a broom. They're just real easy. We just send up a couple thousand, 2,000 to 3,000 people. And that's what they did. They sent up 3,000 people. Anybody know what happened? Anybody read the book? What happened?
They got defeated.
They got it defeated. Actually, it's the one place where we have a record of the number dead. 36 of the Israelis were killed.
Yeah.
That's just one of those like that. That's how bad it was. Because how many died in Jericho?
None.
We don't have any record of any dying. There's no indication anybody died. But they died. Now, why'd they die? I found 3 things that led to their defeat. Okay, 3 things. One, we have no indication they talked to the Lord. It shows it's like, okay, we got this. This is how we did Jericho. We're going to go up to their small thing. We'll just take care of it. What are they trusting in? Themselves. That's item 2. They were relying upon themselves, their power and their might. Hey, we went with 30,000, 40,000 against Jericho. We'll send up 10% of that. And they got to hand it to them. And so when they lost, Joshua and the leaders are like, on the ground, and they rip their clothes, they put dust in there all day, all night. And finally, I project, I guess, to God. He comes down and he says, would you shut up and stop your whining? That's what he basically says to Joshua. What are you doing? Get up. What he's saying to him is, why are you asking me what happened? You should know, if you didn't have victory, why did you not have victory? Huh?
Didn't ask him first.
There's sin. That's the point. You go out on your own, you do without God, you're going to fail. What did God told them? As long as you obey me, you're going to have victory. The implication is if you don't obey me, what's going to happen?
You're going to get defeated.
You're going to get defeated. And then God has to say, Joshua, there's sin in the camp. And so what does he do? He says, okay, here's what you're going to do. Tomorrow morning, you're going to march everybody by you, family by family. We're going to come down to Judah, and we get to Achan. And Joshua says, give God the glory and tell us what you did. Confess your sin. And Achan says, I sinned. I took the gold, I took the silver, I took the clothing from Babylon. It's in my tent. They go and find it. And then Joshua says, you've troubled Israel, God will trouble you today. And they took them out of the camp. They stoned them and burned them. Them, plural. Achan, wife, children. Livestock, everything he owned. Now again, you got people who are going to go, oh, that is harsh. Well, God has said already that the children don't pay for the sins of the parents, and the parents don't pay for the sins of the children. So why is God destroying the wife and the children? Any ideas?
Well, first, that wasn't the case when that happened. That was changed later. Secondly, they were all part of the conspiracy, for lack of a better word.
That's it. And he actually, when we covered it in Deuteronomy, he actually did say that. He says, he does repeat it later. But your responsibility, he does say that the sins of the father will follow the children, right? The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Okay? But that was the issue. They hid them in the tent. Everybody was in. But he's also making a big statement. This is really to what? Convince people of that God is God. He is holy, omnipotent, and omniscient. Right? And that he sees everything, and you're not going to get away with it. That's what happened. It was to get the sin out, and to keep it out. Now, after this, after they've confronted him and dealt with it, then God says, now you're going to go up to Ai. And they basically went up and defeated him. They split their armies, they ambushed him. What you have is that it's not just Ai. There's another town close by called Bethel. So when Joshua sent his troop up, he put it between those 2 towns with the guys to attack Ai. And basically they went up, they drew the people out, and then they outflanked them, they came in behind them, burned the city. But we're told that Bethel came in on the fight. And the indication is Joshua sent 5,000 of his men to go take care of Bethel. And they basically routed them, so Bethel became a non-issue. So they didn't have to be conquered or anything because they got wiped out. But with Ai, God had made a change. He said, okay, now all the plunder is yours. You're to kill all the women and children and all the men, but all the gold, the silver, all that is yours. When they get done, Joshua takes his the people to Mount Ebal, and he builds an altar, he whitewashes the stone, and he writes the law on there, and he reads the law again to everybody. And I take it that Joshua is making darn sure that we don't have another Ai. He wants to impress, everybody's seen what's happened to Achan, okay? But remember, Achan died, but how many Israelis died for his sin? 36. At least 36. Okay? So he's got them, they have the victory, and we have the conquest, and I think we have, again, the picture of the might of the nation growing. I think we also see that the wisdom or the understanding of the leadership. In other words, Joshua is in leadership just like Moses was, and he's learning things like, hey, we went up where we lost because we had sin in the camp, and I got to make sure we don't have sin in the camp. Okay? He also went up with not seeking advice and counsel of the Lord. We have no indication of that. Because I got to go with, if Joshua had gone and said, should we go up to Ai, God had said, you can't go up, I'm not going to go with you. Because that's the picture we have. When there are times when they ask, and should we go up, and God always gave the answer. So we have the next one in chapter 9, and we have the victory of Jericho, we have the victory of Ai, and that information is spreading. If you remember Rahab's story, we heard of what happened 40 years ago, okay? It was no small incident. People knew about the Red Sea, they knew about Egypt. They've heard about the Jordan River, that's why Jericho was shut up. They knew they were coming. Well, as they have this victory, the word starts to spread, because see what's happening is Joshua was coming through the middle of the nation. Can we go to that next slide, that third slide? It's kind of hard to see, but the yellow line is they come in and they divide the land through the front, right, at first. They're going to swing south, they're going to come back and go to the north. So he's splitting the nation. He's dividing the land and controlling the center, which is kind of a very military thing to do. Okay? And all the kings beyond the river, what river? The Jordan River. When they hear about this, they form a confederacy up in the north, okay? And it's against Israel. Now, when the people of Gibeon hear about this, they hear about of Jericho and Ai, and they said, we're not going to be able to defeat these guys. Let's go make a peace treaty. But understand that a lot of the stuff we read, we think it was just held by Israel. The indications are, again, we go back to Rahab, what she says, and what we hear other people say throughout this battle. They know that God is bringing them in the land, and God is going to dispose of the people in the land, and that He's a God of gods. Okay? That's what Rahab said. You're God, the God of all the earth. Okay? So we got the Gibeonites like, we're not going to win. And so what do? They dress up like they've been on the road for a long time, and they go to Joshua and say, hey, let's make a peace treaty. Again, I just see in this, Joshua made a mistake again. Because somebody actually says, how do we know you guys aren't like from right around here and you're just lying to us? And they said, wow, no, look at our clothes. I mean, you know, the food, the clothes, the shoes. And they did what? They went with it. 3 days later, they find out that, oh, they're just around the corner. They lied to us. I find interesting in there is that, again, go ask the Lord. But because they made an agreement, they swore to the Lord, when the people clamored against it, they said, hey, wait a minute, we made a vow in accordance with the instructions of Moses, we can't break it. Now Joshua did put them under servitude. Now again, in our culture, we act like that's this high crime. What was the alternative? Death. Okay, so you make a choice. And again, remember, we read the law. The servitude that they would be under was not to be the servitude we think of in Western society in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century. Okay? We were totally void of this kind of... They were to be treated well or better. Okay? They were to be treated better. So they make a choice and they say, we'll take servitude. Now here's an interesting thing that I'm just, as I'm reading this and I'm thinking about it. For all the stories up and through the fall of Israel, the Gibeonites, I never see that they're responsible for sin in Israel. It's kind of like the profession that Rahab has. It's the profession of Ruth. I don't know if they became, but one of the things is they're told to get rid of the idols, and they were supposed to go and destroy. So we don't have that. I might be reading into that, but it's kind of like, we're going to do this, but here's what you're going to do. Part of the deal is you got to get rid of all your idols, because I never see them leading the nation astray. And in fact, we'll get to this, when Saul is king, he goes to battle against the Gibeonites, and then when David is king, there's a judgment against Israel by God, and he goes to God, and God says, well, it's because Saul killed the Gibeonites and you guys are in a treaty. And David had to make it right. So just an observation, because remember, we read in the law, they were to come to foreign cities and offer them peace terms, and if they accepted them, great. If they didn't, then they were to be destroyed. Now, the Gibeonites were of the group that was supposed to be utterly destroyed. So, again, it's a case I looked at and said, go check with the Lord. I got an idea for us. You got a big decision in life, probably should check with the Lord first. Yeah. And that's, as brothers and sisters in Christ, if it's really a big deal, maybe look for good godly counsel, people you know who are godly, and get their advice. Because sometimes we think we see it all, right? And we miss it completely. So after this, then we have chapter 10, is we have the destruction of the southern troops. That's the campaign. The 5 kings of the Amorites, when they heard about Gibeon, they decided to go up against Gibeon. Okay? And they sent a note to Joshua and they said, hey, we're in treaty, you're supposed to come and be our protector. That was the agreement. And so Joshua does what we would call a force march. They marched all night, and they showed up and they surprised the 5 kings, and they utterly destroyed them. And in fact, this is an interesting story, is that as they were routing them, they decided to try and flee, and as they fled, God sent hailstones to kill them. And it says that more of the enemy died from hailstones than from the actual battle. But this is the place where the battle ensues, okay? And it runs all day, gets to the end of the day, all right? And God has, Joshua asked the Lord to do what? Hold the sun.
Hold the sun still.
Right? It lasted all day to the point that at the ending, he asked him to have the Lord to have the sun stand still, and he did. Now again, today you'll have somebody sit there and say, oh, that's physically impossible. That's why it's called a miracle, right? Right? Hailstone out of a clear sky, and then the sun stands still. It's a miracle. Now, with defeating these 5 kings of the Amorites, they defeated the 5 strongest enemies in the southern section. So they now controlled the area. Here's the thing, though, the battle's not over. There were a lot of other cities in the region, towns and cities and villages that had to be conquered. So he continued to sweep through the land in obedience to the Lord and in defeating the people, okay? Now, the picture of Ai, going back to that, right? Kind of how this entered is, there's a picture there of how the sin of one person can affect the many. You kind of have this, there's a picture there for us to be watchful ourselves, because our actual sins affect others. And this is what Paul dealt with in Corinthians. I think I got it later, where there's sin in the church, and the Corinthians are like proud of the sin. And he goes, don't you get it? A little leaven leavens a whole loaf. And that's why it's important for us individually and corporately to ferret out the sin. And that's a picture for us that there's consequences. And the other thing is, they had a victory over a major enemy, and they thought they could handle the minor enemy. And the reality is, we may get victory over the major things in our life, but God says we got to fight against those little things. Because Solomon said it's the little foxes that destroy the hedges, right? The ones that dig out the root. Little things in our life that we think are no big deal, God says those are the ones that are going to undermine you and your witness. And that's our picture, you know. Now, so he went from the south to up to the north, and that's in chapter 11. This confederacy of northern kings came against Joshua and Israel. Now it talks about they had a very large army. They had horses and chariots. Now that would be like saying you were cavalry, and they had tanks. Okay? That's the kind of the picture. Israel only came with foot soldiers. And God assured Joshua they'd have the victory because God was going to defeat the enemies. Now, he also told Joshua that with the victory, you're to destroy the chariots and hamstring the horses. Like, you know what hamstring is when they cut the hamstring of the horse? It will never be good for battle again. Because what God wanted was for them to trust in Him and not in their weaponry. See, if they had chariots, what were they going to believe in? Their chariots. And you're going to see this as we get through this, where the nation fails, and where they fail is they keep seeing chariots. Where they would trust in chariots, they were fearful of chariots. Okay? Well, we can't go there. They have chariots. He repeats this at the end of Joshua a number of times about how they wouldn't go because they had chariots. Okay? And so he says you're going to destroy the chariots because you're not going to trust in them, because if they started to accumulate chariots, they're going to trust in their army. And he says, I don't want that. Again, this battle to protect Gibeon, more died from the hailstones that God said than the battle. Who fought the battle? God did. God did.
So you're saying that the Israelites never had chariots?
They weren't supposed to. Doesn't mean they didn't. But at this point, God's saying, because they're coming in the land, they've been in the wilderness the better part of 40 years, right? And they're basically just foot soldiers. And they're coming in, and we're going to see this in Judges. They went to battle. They had no spears or shields. They only had swords. Again, that's like showing up to a gunfight with a knife. They went into a gunfight where they had chariots, and God, we'll see this, God gives them the victory. All right? Here was his quote in Joshua 11. They came out, they had all their armies with them, as many people as the sand of the seashore, with many horses and chariots. And then the Lord said to Joshua, don't be afraid, because tomorrow this time I will deliver them slain into the hand of Israel, before Israel, and you shall hamstring their horses and burn their chariots with fire. I think it's a good picture. He's taking away a snare from them. That's why he told them to destroy all the idols, not to put the names of the gods in their lips. He didn't want them to have any part of it. Stay away from it. Now in chapter 12, they conquered the land, and we have a review of the land beginning with Moses, and we kind of go through all the triumphs of the nation. And we get down to Joshua conquers 31 kings that are noted. Okay? Again, the picture is under Joshua's leadership, they're getting rid of the major sin, as it were, in the land. They're getting rid of the major enemies. But they still have to go and take possession of their own land. There's people still there that says, we ain't going. And they've got to move them out. Now the thing is, God wants to move the enemy out, the minor enemies, I'll call them, just like He did the majors, or the big guys, the little guys like He did the big guys. God gave you the victory at Jericho. He gave you the very victory with Ai. He gave you the very victory against the kings, okay? And He did things to give you that victory. He says, you got to go in and do the same thing, and God will still be with you individually. Now, in Joshua 13 through 21, we're going to cover a lot of chapters here, hopefully pretty quick. We have all the formidable foes of the land are defeated. In other words, anybody that could mount an offensive that would threaten the nation has been dealt with. Okay? The only foes left are ones that are localized, and they would be a local skirmish. And I don't know if you know this, Okay? But in May 8th, 1945, when Germany surrendered, was not the end of the war. The Allied forces fought for about 10 years with pockets of insurgents 5 years in Germany. The Nazis just didn't go away quietly. They kept ferreting them out. And actually, interestingly, one of the generals decided the best way to defeat and undermine the Nazis that were around was, because they had more control, they did not allow the press to report it anymore. And once they couldn't report it, they felt they weren't emboldened and they just went away. So they still have the enemy to fight, okay? Joshua divides the land among the 9.5 tribes. Remember, 2.5 are on the east side of the Jordan, Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh, okay? And God repeats a number of times in this section that the Levites had no inheritance to the Lord. Their inheritance was the sacrifices of the people. Remember the story. People would bring their sacrifice. A portion went to the priests. Okay? If they wanted to redeem it, the money went to the priests. They were to trust in the Lord. Now, in Joshua 14, chapter 14, verse 13, we have the story of Caleb. As a reminder, Caleb with Joshua were two spies of the 12 that went into the land originally that came back with the good report. They were the two that entered the land, okay? And the rest of the people who didn't died. Now, you have to think about this. Eleazar, the son of Aaron, and Phinehas, his son, they didn't die in the desert because they're going to be back in the land. So not everybody was against it, but we focus on the two spies. Joshua was the leader and Caleb was there. And Caleb comes and says, I'm 85, do some math. This will give you a timeline. He goes, I was 40 years old when we went into the land. I came back with a good report. I wandered the wilderness with the nation for 40 years. How old is he? 80. He goes, I am now 85. This battle to take the lands is not a weekend trip. They've had to be on the other side of the Jordan for a while. They came across and they started the conquest. So it's been a while. And at this point he says, I get the land. Why did they not want to go into the promised land? What was the 10 bad spies? What was their report? What was the issue? Giants land. You know what Caleb says? I want the mountain with the giants. That's me. He goes, I am 85. I'm going to quote Ernie on this, Ernie Johnson. He goes, it's a piece of cake. They're going to be a piece of cake is what he says, basically. Because he says, God will give me the victory. And Caleb hasn't. I love Caleb's story because as he fights and takes land, he says, I need a mountain taken. That he's head of the family. He's taking his land. He's taken that mountain and the land that has been given him. He goes, I need somebody to go take that mountain. And I love this. He says, whoever goes up there, they get my daughter. And his Othniel says, I think she's pretty good. I'm going. This is her cousin, but he takes it. And he becomes a judge and judges, but he takes the land. Excuse me. Now, what's interesting is there's a picture because then Joshua has given him the land. He takes it. The sons of Joseph come and they complain. They say, we don't have enough land. Was that the issue? No, Joshua says, you got the hill country. You got that area. Well, yeah, but we have to go fight and we have to go cut trees. What they wanted was, they wanted to hand it to him. Joshua said, it ain't going to happen. It's not going to fall out of the sky into your lap. Well, that's our life. We may want to have things and have a life for Christ, but you're going to have to put that out there. You have to do your Bible study. You have to do your prayer. You have to be, as Wally has said, you got to find the gifting God has given you and exercise that and develop it, right, to have the victory. It's not going to fall out of the sky. There's a lot of Christians that just want it to come to them. It's like they miss out on what God has for them. And that's what happened here, because we're going to see that in Judges. The trouble that is encountered is because they don't do it. They don't do what they're supposed to do. He'd already given the land. They needed to go and take possession, knowing that their enemy wasn't going to give up. You know that your enemy your enemy doesn't give up. Sin and your enemy don't give up. It's a battle. You know, Peter says, resist the devil and he'll do what? Flee. But you have to resist. Problem is, we don't often resist. Often we don't resist, right? We capitulate way too easily. A lot of times we call that, you know, we compromise. And God says that's quitting. And you don't get to victory. Right? And we have the account there that, as you can see throughout the rest of Joshua and Judges, right? You'll see the failure of all the tribes to take their land. All the tribes become comfortable. They say it's not for today, maybe tomorrow, and they just become very complacent. And unfortunately, too many times we find that in our own lives. We can become complacent with sin in our life. We go, I know I need to. When? Tomorrow. I'll get to that tomorrow. Right. Why do something today that you could put off till tomorrow, right? Okay, in Joshua 22:24, we have Joshua's farewell. He releases the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe Manasseh. You've done your battle. Go back to the east side of the Jordan. You've got your land. It's all possessed. Now, what's really interesting is, why do they have their land? Was because when Moses came through there, they completely wiped them out. And so they're at peace. On the west side, they still have problems. And they have to fight for them. As they came back to the Jordan, Reuben, Gad, and half Manasseh, they built a big altar. And I find a little interesting story there. They built an altar, and others saw it, and they did what? They presumed they were doing it to offer sacrifices. And God had said, when you enter the land, you're going to offer sacrifices in one place, this place I tell you. You're not to be doing sacrifices all over. And they thought that, and they got all riled up, and they were ready to go to war. But cooler heads prevailed, and they said, well, let's go find out. You know, how many times you see that in life? You see something, somebody sees something, they presume, and they make a rash decision or action, and you know what they really need to do is step back and investigate and find out what really is going on. And what they found out was, they said, no. We're on the other side of the river, and we kind of figured this out, that if eventually, down time, all of a sudden, we may not be considered equal shares in Israel, because we're over here. And so we put this altar as a memorial to you and to us, to our kids and to you, that we're part of Israel just as you are. Just because there's a river separating us doesn't mean we're not with you. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, leads that delegation. They come back with a good report and everybody's at peace. So that's actually an interesting story. In chapter 24, Joshua recounts the faithfulness of God to bring them into the land. Okay? And it's kind of like a backhand to the nation, because Joshua, we're going to see, he gets a little frustrated with them because they're not doing what God has told them to do. They've got their land or portions of it, and they're comfortable. And they think they're going to be fine with sin in their backyard. So he's reminding them what God has done, and with that, what God had called them to. And what had God called them to? What's that? Yeah, obedience. Get rid of them. Why? He told them, you let them hang around. Hey, if you let sin hang out in your life, guess who's going to win? Sin. That's your, it's the old, it's your default position. Your default position is sin. That's why it's a battle. If righteousness was our natural inclination, it would be the easiest thing in the world, would it not? But our natural inclination is to go away from God. Somebody does you wrong, you want to do what? Even. Thank you. Let's be honest here. I want to get even. I want my pound and a half of flesh. Right? I want to bury them. You know? And God says, don't let that be you. Oh, but God, I want to. There's your natural inclination. Right? Somebody gives you a piece of their mind, what do you want to do? You want to back the dump truck up and flip the lever and let it all come out, right? Oh, you think, oh, let me, here I go, right? Natural inclination. God says, get the sin out. That's really and all you got to do is look at the history of Israel. That's why we're told in the New Testament, all these things were written for us. The idea is we can look at that and say, you know, it really doesn't work out that well to let sin hang out with you. And the thing is, it's an ongoing forever battle. And you can't get weary. You got to stay the course. That's what he's telling them. He reminds them to emphasize the duty to God, to serve Him alone, and have no association with the surrounding nations. And if they did, and if they adopted the gods, and they forsook the Lord, consequently God would abandon them to destruction. And anybody know what happened? That's what happened. There's plenty of warnings here. And again, for us, it's like plenty of warnings. We should be on the alert in our own life to keep the sin out. Interestingly, in 24, it talks about how, as God delivered them, He sent hornets to drive out some of the enemies. Which, if you think about it, when they got done with Jericho, it was uninhabitable. Ai was uninhabitable. They burned it to the ground. They burned that to the ground. So some of the cities, God said, I sent hornets. And I drove the people out before you even got there. They just showed up and it was all there. At the end, we have 3 burials. We have the burials of Joshua, Eleazar, who's the chief priest, and then the bones of Joseph. If you remember Joseph, when he died, he said, you know what? God is going to visit you and take you back to the land. You take my bones. My 2 cents is that great pyramid in Egypt, that was Joseph's. That's just my opinion. They took the bones. Moses took the bones and they buried them. We got 15 minutes to go through a couple of books of Judges. Here's my synopsis of Judges for you. I liken it to a wheel. We're going to start at the top. It's going to be high. The people are obeying God. They are blessed of God. And then they start to slide. They get fat and happy and lazy, metaphorically. And they start embracing the people around them. In other words, they're no longer excited about church. They're looking for something a little more jazz, a little more pizzazz. And so they start looking at other things and start doing it. And that's what the church has done. The church was like, oh, we come, we read 66 books, and we don't sound intelligent now because the intelligent people are telling us we don't sound intelligent. You ever read that book as a kid called The Emperor Has No Clothes? Mm-hmm. That's where I think so many Christians fall, is they listen to the world's going, this is great, and we need to be the ones saying, the emperor has no clothes on. You know, the world in the 60s had the sexual revolution out of the 50s and the 60s, and too many of the church people said, boy, that sounds exciting, maybe we should dabble in it. Maybe we should just be less boisterous about it. Maybe we shouldn't condemn it as much. Maybe we should be more understanding. How'd that slide work for us in our culture? No, Romans 1, right down to the bottom, says God gave them over to a reprobate mind. Women burned in lust for women, forsaking the natural use of the man. And the man burned in lust for another man, forsaking the natural use of a woman. That's where sexual revolution has led us to in our nation. And the problem was the church sat there and said, well, it's not exciting enough. We do look kind of stodgy, but maybe we were, but the fact was we abandoned God. And that's what Israel do. They get happy, they're doing okay, and they start looking around like, well, how do you guys do it? Well, that's different, let's go try that. This is boring. God said we only can do it this one way. And God told you that would be. And so they would go and sin. God would abandon them. Their enemies, the ones that they embraced, would then have dominion over them. And in that dominion, they would eventually cry out. God would raise up a judge who would serve for a lifetime. And during his lifetime, or her lifetime, the nation would be blessed. And they would come back, and they'd get to the top of the wheel, and they would repeat it again. That is a summary of Judges as you read it, time and time again. And Judges is a time of change. We had Moses, and remember when Moses had Aaron with him, and Aaron was his spokesman, but God talked to Moses. When Joshua took over, God said, now I'm going to speak through Eleazar, and you will direct the people. We had a bifurcation of responsibilities. And now that Joshua is dead, they're to be relying on the chief priests, who was the primary, And remember, where were the Levites at the time? Anybody know where the Levites were now that they've conquered the land?
Spread out.
Spread out. Do you have the last slide? After they conquer the land, this is kind of where they're at. Gad, Reuben, Ephraim, Benjamin, Dan, Manasseh, Issachar, Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali, Dan, Judah down to the south there. Okay? But in all those regions were priests, Levites. So if there was a question, they were to go to them. And the priests were to be the ones to give them direction. The priests were to be the ones to first line of defense against apostasy. This is a change. And if they couldn't decide at the local level, then they were to escalate it on up to the chief priest, who at this point becomes Phinehas, okay, after Eleazar is dead, and get the answer from God. This is a change as judges has come in. But obviously that doesn't happen because the people go off. And as you read Judges, you'll see that there's it's pockets. Okay, so when you read it, he's addressing a local region. Like if there's sin in Dan and Naphtali, up in that area, which we'll get to there, that's the story we're going to focus. It doesn't tell us anything of what's happening down in Judah. Okay, it's just talking about these people are doing this up in here, and God raises up a judge to judge the people. It's a shift in responsibility and relationship. Now it opens up with good. Joshua dies, and it says the people, which is again the priest, chief priest, who would be the chief priest, went to the Lord and said, "Are we to go up and conquer?" And he says, "Yeah, Judah's supposed to go up first." So what's Judah supposed to do? Conquer. And they did. They said, "You know what? We're going to go do that." But they turned to Simeon. Now, if you remember the thing with Simeon, and you got to kind of go back. And you go back to Simeon with his sister in Shechem. What did they do? They're very vengeful, very, very hard. And Jacob, at his death, said that. He goes, "You guys hamstrung an oxen just because you're spiteful." So Joshua says, "Who's my brother that I need?" "Hey, Simeon, let's go up and fight." So he brought the army with him. The Simeons were fighters. And he says, "You come up and help me defeat my enemies, then I'll come and help defeat you." So this looks good. This is where they're going. Well, that's about, after that, it hits a flat note. Because after that, in chapter 2, it opens with, "The angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal and said, I brought you out of Egypt to the land I swore to your fathers. And I said, I'll never break my covenant with you." In verse 2, "And you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and you shall tear down their altars. But you have not obeyed me. What have you done?" Verse 3, "Therefore I will not drive them out before you, but they will become a thorn in your side, and their gods will be a snare to you." See, Judges starts out with, here's the model, and it's like that's what they did, and then it was like, we're done. We're just kind of, we're okay where we're at. And God says, because you haven't obeyed, I'm pulling back my blessing. And what we're going to see in Judges is God never brings his blessing back until they're in obedience. And the way he gets them into obedience is allowing their enemies to have dominion over them, and then they get sick and tired of it, and they call out to him. That's the picture of Judges. The new generation, the generation with Joshua served him, but after that generation, they didn't pick it up. We don't know if it was that the parents didn't obey God and teach their kids in the rising up and the setting down and the going out and the coming in. If they didn't repeat the stories they were supposed to, or if they were just kind of like humans, like, they're kids, they'll figure it out. Unfortunately, it's not what God says. This time of the Judges is roughly about 400 years, somewhere in that area. Some put it at 350, 55, some put it at 450 years. So let's just say it's around a 400-year period, because there is some overlap with some of the Judges. In chapter 2 ends with the God said, "I'll no longer drive them out." He repeats what he started the chapter with. And in order to test Israel and whether they'll keep the walk the way of the Lord or not. They've forsaken God, and God says, "I'm pulling out my blessings." He says, "I'm not breaking my covenant with you." Now you're going to fight the battles on your own. That's the picture. And again, I look at this and say, how does that affect the church? You know, we want God's blessing, but God says, if you want to do it on your own, go right ahead. Let me know how that works out for you, right? Anybody have a testimony on that? It don't work out too good when you do it on your own. Now, Judge 3, we'll get through here. We have a count of the first 3 judges. Othniel, I mentioned him. He was the nephew of Caleb, and they were oppressed by the Mesopotamians for about 8 years. God raised him up, and he defeated them, and then the people had peace for 40 years. The next we had an interesting character, Ehud, E-H-U-D. Anybody know anything about that guy? Thank you. He's left-handed. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is. You know why?
Carried the sword the other way.
He carried his sword the opposite way, so when he came in to see the king, they didn't check that side. And guess what? He took care of the king, and he led the revolt, and he had victory. And it says actually out of there was 80 years of peace, because there's some other things going on concurrently, it seems like, because there's a guy, Shamgar, S-H-A-M-G-A-R, and all we have about him was he killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad, which they said is kind of like, could be used as a spear. And really, I caught it as like, you know, there's no record of him as judging people, but he might be a microcosm or a picture of how the individual, much like Phineas in Numbers, okay, who had the commitment to God, could do great things for God. And we know that in the account of Deborah and Barak, which is chapters 4 and 5, actually in the song of Deborah and Barak in chapter 5, they actually mentioned him. So, you know, were they contemporaries? Were they one ahead of the other? Was he well before them? We don't know. But that's what we have. Now, Deborah and Barak is interesting. Deborah is a prophet at the time. And I look at that and go, why is she a prophet in the northern tribe? Well, first off, we know the northern tribes aren't really behaving for God. They're doing their own thing. And she's the one that God says, who's listening to me. And God says to her, get Barak and go up and defeat the enemies of the Canaanites. And Barak comes and says, I ain't going without you. And she says, that's all fine. Understand that the glory was going to go to a woman and not you. Now here's the thing I think is significant, because you don't catch it in chapter 4, you catch it in chapter 5, but they have the victory, and they went against the Canaanites, and they had a lot of chariots. I think it says they had like 900 chariots. That's a lot of chariots. So they have the victory. Then chapter 5 is a song of of Deborah and Barak, and in there you actually get the battle. And what you have is God flooded the one river, a little stream. He flooded. You know where he stopped the Jordan? Well, here he flooded the river. What did the flooding do? It made the chariots ineffective because they're in mud. Because the general has to get out of his chariot and run away, realizing he's defeated. Because it says in the song that Israel came out without shield or spear. They were foot soldiers with swords. They had no chance to go against these chariots, but they had the victory. And this is the picture that I pick up, was for all the naysaying of Joshua and Judges, because the opening of Judges chapter 1, God goes through each of the tribes and how they didn't take their land, and repeats 3 times because they had chariots, because they had chariots, because they had chariots, right? And God here's a picture of like, this is what I can do with a chariot. I can make it muddy and they can't work. I can do like the Egyptians and I can have the wheels fall off them. What's really interesting is, so he fled on foot and he ran into the tent of Jael, J-A-E-L, the wife of Heber, a Kenite. Anybody know who Kenite is? Who the Kenites were? In Judges 1:16 we're told Kenite was Moses' father-in-law.
Oh, okay.
And if you remember earlier when they came in, Moses told them, hey, have your people come with me. Now we're also told that the Kenites had peace with them.
I thought they were Midianites.
He was a priest of the Midianites, but Joshua 1:16 says, the descendants of Kenite, Moses' father-in-law. So maybe it's a branch off of. But here's what's interesting, because this is another woman. And he comes to her for safety. She says, lay down. I'll take care of you. You know what she does when he falls asleep?
Pierce his ear.
She took a tent peg and drove it through his skull, through his temple. And when Barak came looking for him, says, there he is. It ends with the mother watching for her son to come back, who's never coming back. And the sons of Israel plundering the victory. And again, this is this picture of obedience to God and disobedience to God. They thought they were going to be victorious because the Canaanites, because they were trusting in their power and in their might, and God says, I can bring that to nothing. And he did. And there's a picture there that Israel needed to get. What did it take to be victorious?
Living in God.
Living for God, obedience. Because God says, I don't care who your enemy is, I can thwart whatever they bring. Some come with horses, some come with trains, planes, and automobiles and tanks. God says, I can end it. Remember Ecclesiastes, Solomon says, the race doesn't always go to the swiftest. Okay? And the battle doesn't always go to the mightiest. Don't look at it from human terms. Do you have a battle in your life? Don't look at it and say, I'll never be over this. I can't get victory over it. God says you can. But it takes you coming to Him and being obedient to Him. It's time. So that was, like I said, it was a jet tour of Joshua and Judges. But what we have is we have the land divided, the land conquered, the people in the land. Now they got to live their life. And the biggest problem that Israel is going to face in their history is they didn't get the sin out. And that's what God has warned them. This is in your life, this is in the land, and it's going to trip you up. If you have things in your life that you look at the Bible and God says that's not good, you need to get it out. Because if you don't, it will have dominion over you. It will hit the victory. You have to strive with God to root it out. Let's close in prayer. Lord, we thank you for this day and for your word and for the record. And the picture, Lord, we have of not letting sin reign in our mortal flesh, but Lord, we are to lay off every sin that so easily ensnares us and seek after Christ, and in that we'll have the victory. We ask you, Lord, in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you, everybody.